Okay. A very nice and good evening. I hope everybody is in good health. I would like to welcome you all to our today's evening lecture at the Leibniz University in Hanover. And I have to just screw down here the voice. We are very happy to announce today one of the lecturers in this evening series, and we have today the great honor to welcome Muoto architects from Paris, Yves Moreau and Gilles Delalex. The lecture will take place in the series of learning landscapes that's organized by our faculty, or by our chair, in fact. So we are working on education buildings, in fact, and it's great to have Muoto here today because they were busy with this subject as well. And of course, there are a French office which is related to the most recent Arche Plus magazine, where I was in the great position to do the co-editing of the magazine, where we also did a lot of interview and stuff with Muoto architects. So it's a combination of these two subjects. Maybe a few words about Muoto. The office has been founded in 2003, so it's meanwhile already 17 years ago as well. They have a very specific, very special style for French architecture, a very kind of dry and at first sight regional style, which in the end is not really true at all, but that's just a very funny circumstance, which we can discuss maybe later. They have been building a few remarkable buildings, like for instance a campus building in Saclay, which I hope they will show tonight. A building in Paris, which has been awarded with the Prix Dejean, which is the most famous architecture award in France in 2016. So it's kind of welcoming building for the university campus. They built social housing as well, public social housing, for instance, Rue Stendhal in Paris, which is their first project as far as I remember. And they built a school also, a public school in Boulogne in Paris. And besides that, quite some other projects and also unbuilt projects where we will have now the lecture about. They are teaching as well, so that's also quite important. Gilles is teaching already quite a long time in Paris-Malaquais at the architecture school. And Yves is teaching at the Peter Behrens School in Düsseldorf, where Oliver and me have been teaching before. So he's not following us up, but he was introduced a little bit by us at the school, which is quite cool that he's taken now as a teacher. So very warm welcome to Yves and Gilles, and I pass you the word, so please start with your lecture.
Well, thank you very much, André, for your presentation. Thank you very much for the invitation as well. We're really happy to be with you tonight. So this is not the most typical conference that we're doing, because it's very focused on very few buildings and projects. There are 5, so we'll have time to reflect on them. The common theme is the program of these buildings, since they are dedicated to education. We call this conference public schools. It's actually 2 words, that do not necessarily come together. We wondered what the common feature was, between these different projects, and we thought it's certainly the search for publicness rather than strictly education. This is very much related to the French context, since we have in France there's a tradition for public schools. We we live in a so-called Republican society, and we have that very strong model, which is called the Republican school. You know, it's a tradition that brings us back to 18th century. You know, the whole Enlightenment philosophy and the idea of helping children to become enlightened citizens, you know, to become part of society, and that's a very strong vocation of schools, of public schools in France. I would say even more important than education itself. You know, it's education not just in the sense of learning grammar and mathematics. It's about learning how to become part of society, to learn the social codes, social rules, and be part of it. And the idea, the philosophy that is dominating in France, this Republican tradition, is based on the idea that there should be like a neutral common ground for all children, meaning that all differences of religion specifically and religious as well as political and social values should be erased, so that all girls and boys become equal citizens. This idea of equality and sort of a neutral base is not as simple as it seems, because there are lots of debates at the moment in France regarding that Republican model, because it is very much questions on its capacity to integrate specific communities, Muslims today at the moment, whose cultural values, you know, that are embedded in eating, in food traditions, such as dressing and relation between men and women, boys and girls, the sport activities and so on. You know, many of these values sometimes contradict the Republican values. You know, it's not that easy to put everybody, you know, to put all the population just like flat, like if we were just things, you know, we're still human beings, and everybody carries family and cultural values. So the typical Republican school in France, we still have quite a number, are pretty enclosed buildings with the playground in the middle, usually surrounded by two vertical stone buildings, one on the right for the girls and one on the left for the boys, or the way, or well, it doesn't matter if it's right or left, and large chestnut trees in the middle, so kids can throw chestnuts at each other. You know, it's always what happens. This interior court is really close from the street. You have large walls and usually central porch, and for each school. And of course, nowadays this architectural model does not exist as such. I mean, you don't build school this way, but we believe that there's a lot of it remaining in the programs we find each time we attend a competition. So, you know, the focus is very much on the security of children, and we, you know, by experience, you know, having to design schools in other countries, we're very much aware that this hyper protection scheme is very French. So we'll show you some projects that are more or less related to that model, some that try to contradict it, just look for maximum openness, and some that play the game and try to work with this idea of absolutely protecting the children. And I think this is one common question that we have each time we design a school is how can you open it to the city, because schools should be symbolically open to the city, while they should be totally closed off from the outside to protect the children. So that's the basic question, and there's no, of course, no simple answer about it. So 5 projects. I think we'll go back a little bit in time. We'll start from the most recent, and we go back to the earliest buildings, which are not schools. We'll finish with Saclay, if you just to make sure it will come, but it's probably the most open project that we've done so far, but maybe because it's not related to young children, but it's dedicated mostly to students and researchers of the campus, of the Saclay campus. So the first project we will show tonight is a school we did recently. It's a competition that we did not win for reasons that you may understand, because it's really not the typical French school. It's situated in Versailles, at the very end of the gardens of the castle of Versailles. It's hardly visible, but it's really at the very end, and it's still in a green space that just outside the limits of the garden. And we thought we would play with that theme and work with this idea of the garden that is cultivated as a means to for education, as a way to learn how to behave in as a community. And we thought it was a good exercise for the children. So the building is basically conceived as a greenhouse that is filled in with the classrooms and the different collective spaces. And the top of the building, the upper floor, is conceived as a cultivated garden that should have been taken care of by the children. We had in mind these beautiful greenhouses from 19th century, why they're known mostly in England, but we have some beautiful ones in France that come a little bit later in Auteuil. This is the Auteuil greenhouses, and we thought it would be really great if kids would benefit from such an environment. Of course, the scale of the buildings makes it a little bit smaller, although we're not far from this one here. And the whole project was focused on this idea of enveloping, of creating a world, slightly autonomous world, yet open to the outside for the children. So basically, it's the structure that is filled in with concrete blocks and glass. And the way the building was really conceived was pretty much through that typical section where you have the garden on the top floor. You have a double skin on the southwest facade, so that it works as a winter garden that you can open and close. And on the right, you get the canopy to protect children from the rain when they play outside. So this is the plan of the garden. It's really well organized because it's pretty much like a gigantic, really large classroom. And the lower floors are organized through an entrance, a hall that crosses the building from north to south and connect the two schools. I don't know if it's the same in Germany. French schools are typically, elementary schools are typically separated between maternelle, I don't know what, 3 to 6 and 6 to 10, 11, basically. And so you have one school for the youngest and another on the top floor for the eldest of the kids. So that's the building in the end with the image of meaning that the garden itself is a themes in the organization and the envelope of the building, but also in its image as well. So here's another one.
Here's another one. It's a school we built in Boulogne. Boulogne is a city very close to Paris, and Boulogne was very known for its car industry. And it has so Renault, the car maker, had huge factories on the city of Boulogne. And over the years, they left Boulogne, or at least partially, and so there was a huge land available. And so there has been a lot of housing and projects, and because there is housing, you need schools. And so this was the last of the 3 schools that was going to be built in this huge neighborhood of Boulogne. And as you see, the site is quite particular because it's a triangle site. It's a site that's embedded in this kind of very urban surroundings. So how do you fit a squarish program into a triangular site? It was not easy. It was not easy because the program was very, as Gilles said, kind of very Republican, very structured, very well organized, and it didn't really fit on the site. So it was a whole question on how to be able to stack all the program together and to give it a real identity into this neighborhood. So we had 2 basic kind of starting points for this project. One was the idea of, I mean, maybe also of the materiality, because it was maybe an old industrial site. So we had the idea of stacking maybe containers or something like that. It also responded to the fact that the site was very small, so we knew that we had to superpose different programmatic elements. And then there was maybe a kind of more romantic approach with the color and the way the sky would kind of come down to the ground and to this horizon. And so we had these 2 main focus points when we conceived this building.
We chose German references just only German references.
And so this the project it's a square that kind of becomes the interface for the school. The school, I forgot to mention, it's a quite large school. It has nurseries, classrooms, and elementary. So there are 10, 12 classrooms, and so each have their own courtyards. Of course, like Gilles said, in the center of the system, of the kind of small fortress in a way. And there was one kind of gymnasium also, which is quite important because the gymnasium becomes a kind of a lantern at the end of this stacking, because all the programs are kind of surrounding this inner courtyard. So they grow, they get bigger and bigger, and so they finish with this huge gymnasium, which is not only the gymnasium for the school itself, it's also a gymnasium for for the neighbor, for the surrounding. So there is a kind of activity during daytime for the school and also during nighttime for the inhabitants of Boulogne. And so the idea playing with this bluish glass of the gymnasium you see on the top is at night it becomes a lantern. You see the light, you see maybe some shapes of the people playing there, and it becomes a kind of a landmark on this corner of the site. So you see the whole building is really made out of metal cladding and this blue U-shaped glass. They have a kind of the same dimensions, and it kind of envelop and give a unity to the whole building. The building is also composed by a series of I wouldn't say public spaces, but of I mean you had this kind of public square in front of the school, but then you have all the public and I mean the playgrounds for the children. And because the site was so small, we had to superpose all the different playgrounds. So the one playground becomes a ceiling of another playground, and so you have several layers of playgrounds that are stacked one above each other. And so this is well, the chestnut tree is just a bit small yet, but I think it will grow in a few years, and it will also it also kind of an environmental approach to bring the sun protection into the inside of the I mean the classrooms. And here you see the section of the building. On the right side you have the entrance of the square. You have this the courtyard of the small children on the ground floor because it was easy to enter, and then you have the bigger children that go directly on the first floor and on the second floor, and then you see this huge gymnasium on top of the building, which is a kind of a multifunctional gymnasium because it's also there is a global theme on the school, which is digital. It kind of a way of teaching maybe differently. We've been working very much with the Académie of Versailles that takes care of the education of this district. So the school becomes kind of a digital way of teaching, and so the gymnasium became also kind of a rock concert.
There's a good sound system. That's what it means. you can show movies and play concerts, which opens quite a lot. That's the function of the gymnasium. That's the way of opening the building. Let's say it's closed from the outside, but there's two entrances for the gymnasium. This is a schools that we did earlier when we were younger. It was a collaboration. One of the first project we did together at almost at the same time as Standard. They run parallel. So we were associated with Jean de Jacinto, an architect from Bordeaux, and the context was again quite different. It was in Clichy, which is on the outskirts of Paris, in the north of Paris, and they have this industrial site with huge gas tanks before, and it's a plateau. It's raised from about 6-7 meters, and it was absolutely completely polluted. The nice thing is that it was really surrounded by really thick walls, stone walls that are still remaining. But the school had to take place as in the part of the park that had to be removed because all the pollution. So the whole idea behind the school is that we would just replace that piece of geography with a volume that would be exactly the same, while the roof would be covered with grass and would align itself with the new park that has been created on that former industrial land. So basically, this is a school that is absolutely carved in the ground. It's conceived as a thick piece where the two courts are the two playgrounds are are taken off. The two halls, and that was one way to protect the children, while the roof that will be partly accessible is a way to open the building on the green park. Since there's a slope on these sides, to reach the upper part, of the park to the lower part of the street. The building is pretty much conceived as a large stair with the two schools on two different levels, but slightly overlapping. And that's really this is something you really see on the long section, where the moment where the two schools overlap each other, that's where all the collective activities that are shared by the two schools are situated. I think we have a zoom, yes, and on the lower part, there's a space that was not included in the program that we call the cave, because it was totally dark. So let's keep it, and kids certainly love to play in caves. The upper level is occupied mainly by a large room, that the city can use, for elections and stuff. It's a public room, and the top floor is a pedagogical garden that's situated just on the roof. It's pretty much the structure of a bridge with two levels. So these are the plans. You see that this is the limits are exactly the limits of the site today. So that the main feature of the building in the competition was to remain super low, was to manage to fit all the programs is only 2 floors, whereas it was meant to be organized around 3 or 4 floors. So that made the overall organization a lot more much easier. Here's the two courts. One is on 2 levels and one is on 1 level. On the ground of the 2 playgrounds are graphically covered with labyrinths. That is there are 2 real ones. There's an entrance and an exit. I'm not sure the kids will ever find them, but we know that it's possible to cross the 2 playgrounds by really following the one way. We just hope that one day they'll discover it. We used a structure that was pretty much related to the I don't know how you call that, the retaining structures, that you use to keep the soil from falling down. That quite infrastructural vocabulary that you find on the existing walls, and we kept that structure visible. The inside of the building is kept as raw as possible, with the structure remaining strongly visible, and the partition are made of wood. You see that on the overall circulation in the building go around the building. It creates sort of a buffer zone that ensures the thermal insulation of the building. We also use that new glass to keep the children slightly invisible from the outside, but at the same time it brings natural light into the school. The fact of keeping the inside so raw, we we explained it as pedagogical attitude. We thought, if kids bump into a concrete column, then they will know it's dangerous to run without looking towards you. We thought, if the buildings appears as it is, then they maybe understand something more than it just face fake ceilings and cardboard partitions. So that's how we explained it. Well, it just partly worked since we did it this way. So the architecture of the building in the end is very much fabricated, made by the overall technical apparatus of the building that is usually hidden in most schools. This is the cave that we talked about at the beginning. The dark part.
It had a lot of foam on the pillars because it was there.
Yeah, we did add some foam a bit, so that doesn't hurt too much. That's one of the space just in front of the cave as well. It was really almost the first construction site we followed. It was shared, so we were quite excited by this moment of construction. The concrete was fairly okay, the quality, which is not very usual in France, and so we totally enjoyed that moment of the building, and we thought it would be nice that the construction appears in the building while it would be finished, and many times, I don't know if it happens to all architects, but you feel that when the building is under construction, it certainly looks better than you had imagined, and you want to keep it just the way it is, and you think, hey, could we stop building stuff around? Could we just keep it like this? And that's where probably, as André mentioned, that rawness came is probably from these first acts of construction. We thought that they were the moment where the building is not absolutely finished is maybe the most interesting one, because it keeps the future of the buildings open, and you can imagine that many things happen inside. Maybe it'd be turned into something else than a school later. So that's a concept that we grew up in the office, and we searched for a term. We called it the joyful ruins. All those kinds of constructions that we thought were somehow suspended, or hesitating between construction and destruction. We thought, sometimes some buildings you don't really know if they are being built, they're growing, or whether they are being destroyed, if they're regressing. Usually the structure is pretty visible, but it's not. And it seems that this is a kind of structure that is not meant to be seen, and that's how we make structures in general. And we thought there were those kinds of ruins. We found them. It's quite in a typical kind genre of photography at the moment that focuses on road infrastructures and bridges. We selected that series from Amélie Labordette, who took pictures in the south of Italy and Sicily, where many infrastructures have been abandoned for political reasons, and you can see that these buildings are not normal ruins. They're not. It's just that the process of construction has stopped, and they just remain like this. And you can imagine that we may restart them one day. And you can feel that they keep that potential to start again. And that's the very little difference with absolutely non-finished building and romantic ruins. That rather talks about time passing and stuff. Those are quite different. And we thought that even in architecture, you have some buildings that are such rooms. We thought of this Tower of Shadows by Le Corbusier in Chandigarh that is quite timeless. It's from 1950, but it's hard to date it otherwise. It's hard to say when it was built. And we thought of this new Sky Building number 3 by Eugene Watanabe. It's a building that was meant to be destroyed a few years ago. It's a metabolist building, so it was supposed to grow, like a tree. Of course, it never did, and maybe it's better like that because it became quite. It got a nice patina. It was quite interesting as well when it was almost meant to be torn down. But it was repainted a few years ago and renovated, with and taking the colors of the trees, the Japanese blossoming cherry tree. So we thought that this building that is like the phoenix now. It was reborn somehow. It had the chance to have a second life. So we continue with on our structures. Unfinished structure.
Yeah, unfinished structure, unbuilt. Unbuilt, sadly, but still quite interesting. And this one is not in France. It's in Belgium, in Brussels. It's close to the site where you have the Belgian TV. So you have the French and the Flemish part. So they each have their own building. It's situated next to a highway, and when you come from Leuven or for Germany, you arrive on this highway, and then you enter the tunnels, famous tunnels into Brussels. And so the context is quite interesting because you have on both sides of this kind of small park in the center, you have. On the left side, you have the Flemish TV. On the right side, you have the French-speaking Belgian TV. And then on the north side, you have a piece of housing block. So the question was, should we close this urban block or should this school be independent? And the school is quite interesting because it's a school for media and public relations. So, and because of this specific topic and specific program of education, we decided that the building should kind of exist on its own and kind of be into the dialogue with these two big buildings of the Belgian TV. So you see, it's a big structure, but it has two sides actually. It has one side is very flat, becomes kind of a huge screen that kind of relates to the Belgian TV buildings, and then you have a back side which is more kind of more domestical, and it kind of comes into relation to the urban dwelling blocks that's behind. So this school, well, it had many functions and had many different sides of functions with large studios. You see in the ground floor, and then you had the common spaces. You had classrooms, and on the top, in the very small spaces, you had small editing rooms. So actually the structure in itself is kind of defining the way we organized the different functions. So there is a strong relation between the size of the function and then this kind of triangular shape of the building. Also this the way of having these exterior terraces on it's also on the south side. It was a way to, it's a way to extend the inner space to the outside. So the roof becomes a kind of a teaching space as well. Of course, you can get some fresh air and stuff like that. And it also introduces the idea of having a building that you can climb on. So you had this kind of stairs that were put on these terraces. You could go through the exterior terraces through the whole building. The idea of this building was also to because it was a kind of it's a media school, so for us in your kind of imaginary, we thought it kind of related to a technological project. So for us, I mean, and also because it's a media school, so we think of antennas, we think of cables, we think of waves and stuff like that. So it was for us also a way to to show the functions, but also show the technicity of all this media equipment you could have in the school. And because the school is media, you had, it's a school for the teachers, for the staff, and all for the students, and they learn how to how to frame pictures, how to have views, perspectives, depth of field, and stuff like that. So we thought that maybe the building itself could become the stage for their experiment. Anyway, so they could use all the kind of different features or specificities or kind of strange angles or perspectives or double heights of the building as a stage finally for their experiments. And so the whole building with this huge screen becomes a kind of a stage of the activity of the school, to the city. I think that was kind of a strong statement, and it was kind of very much related to the specificity of the school itself.
Here, I think one argument that we raised, as opposed to maybe other project, is that the flexibility of the building, which was a strong requirement by the future users, would not be achieved through neutral spaces, usually floors that repeat themselves with as little structure as possible, but with a multiplicity of depth. Because we thought that the condition of natural light really defined different conditions of use. We often take that example. If you take Beaubourg, Pompidou in Paris, you have the most flexible space inside because it has really no column, and it's a very deep building, but there's nothing else you can do but what has been going on since it opened. It's not a flexible building because most of it is absolutely dark. So it's great for exhibition and libraries, but it's hard to work there. So we thought here, the idea of flexibility does not go through this idea of the neutral, but on the most diverse conditions. So you can, as Yves said, so that you can have tiny cells. Like I don't remember. It's like a bedroom.
It's very small, kind of video editing room. So it's computer screens and kind of close the curtain.
And the students, they stay there for 2 months, I think. So it has to be nice. We put them on the roof, and the studios are really wide. So the idea is that you can do different things in a building, and that's the real flexibility of the building. It engages people to do something and something else as well. So a little break for fun. The little point of this reference that we often make to the modern infrastructure, and the way we try to reinterpret it, and as we've done in this previous project and in the next one. I think the modern infrastructure has very much changed in terms of signification from the modern ages till today. And we, as a generation probably, who really haven't lived a petrol crisis, or well, we're very young, we certainly have a very different look at this public infrastructure as it is. It really probably got a certain patina and as a different appeal. And I think that there's a few stills from Jean-Luc Godard's movie Pierrot le Fou that you must have probably seen. I think it's quite a good example of that change of function. I think it was pretty much of a joke from Godard, because it depicts, this scene, it depicts a moment where Jean-Paul Belmondo and Anna Karina, they're running away from really bad guys. They're running away from those crooks, that follow them chase them from Paris, and they're running down to the south of France. So it's halfway, like between a road movie and a comedy, which is quite rare kind of movie. You hardly mix them together. And in that moment, I don't remember what moment in the movie, Jean-Paul Belmondo and Pierrot and Anna Karina, they find this car that seems to have been crashed again down the motorway, and they think, hey, why don't we pretend that we had an accident so they'll believe that we're dead and they won't follow us. So they stage their own death by crashing their own car and setting it into fire. And as the camera pulls back, you realize that the motorway is just a tiny piece of motorway. So it's absurd. There's no way they could have an accident there because there's absolutely no motorway. So it's a totally absurd scene, which is quite funny in fact. And they just run away in the fields. We found on the internet the actual bridge that's still there. Pretty much
it exists for real.
Pretty much the same. There are a few more trees around, but it ages pretty well since it looked already old on that picture. And I think here Godard probably made a point, against the way modernity had turned into a consumer society. I think that's the point. But it also says that the infrastructure has become another thing, another kind of stage, has entered a new a new narrative, that maybe we try to reflect on and use it for imagining new buildings. So if you see the landscape pretty much the same, that's when we arrived in Saclay. I think it was 2012. Like a long time ago, and that's at the very beginning of the construction of this campus. The brief basically was to design a public building, a place to meet. It's called a lieu de vie in French. It means a place to meet. It was renamed public condenser later, and in English, because you had to translate lieu de vie, and the plan was basically to construct a new city, a new campus here, and in the middle of cornfields, forest, and a few buildings from the 70s and 90s, and it was hard to believe that there would be a city one day there. And we thought, oh, what a strange idea to imagine almost the first building, very symbolic first stone, where people are supposed to gather, but these people are not there yet. So, this absence of context was pretty much the starting point, and we thought that we would have to imagine a specific public space, specifically designed for this absence of context. So what we did is we imagined that the building itself would be a vertical public space, and we did stack, as we often do, the different activities on top of each other. So you can see the very flat agricultural landscape that is slightly further away, and that is quite beautiful, and you also see little water towers everywhere. And we thought it would be quite magical to play basketball on the roof. So the building comprises two programs that are usually normally set apart. You know, it's basically half kitchen, restaurant, collective restaurant, which is a very technical program, and a sport activity with two indoor sport rooms and basketball courts on the roof. And also we introduce a square on the south side by trying to use as little land as possible. So the main feature of this building that I don't know how much it shows is actually a staircase. It's a staircase that is both outside and inside the building. It's like in a Klein bottle. It's like it goes, inside goes, the outside goes in the inside and back outside again. So you don't really know if you're outside or inside. This staircase is fundamental for the overall activity of the building because it allows to reach all the different places of the building independently. So you don't need a main entrance. There's actually no main entrance in this building. Every single room can be accessed from the outside directly. The idea was to be able to run the building 24 hours a day without having, an entrance hall, a key, or a card, or something like this. So here's the program. Here you have the cafeteria. Here the logistics at the back. That's an open terrace. That's a place we propose not to fill in, that it remains unprogrammed. That's the technical stuff, the stuff that you usually put on the roof and you try to hide as much as you can. That's the cuisine and entrance of the restaurants. That's the main room of the restaurants. They will give it a double height so that it can be used for many other purposes, like showing movies, pretty much like the same function as the gymnasium in Boulogne. And these are the sport rooms and the two basketball courts on the roof. So here's the roof. You see the staircase at the bottom, which is, I think, 7 meters wide. It's really the size of a staircase for a stadium. It's pretty much like the way we thought of the school in Brussels. We thought it would be like a public infrastructure that should look like it can welcome crowds of people, even though they will remain empty most of the time. We thought this is really an architecture of the crowd because like stadiums, they remain empty most of the time. But somehow you get this feeling that they can be filled with people when they're actually maybe more beautiful when they're empty, because you have that potentially that phantom ghost crowd that's everywhere. And this building, for instance, is full of people twice a day, and it's empty for the rest of the time. So we also played on the organization of the different activities to keep it slightly alive 24 hours a day. The basketball is freely accessible, and it's on the roof and sort of attracts users. So today it's pretty much used, and therefore it's a very different model that different from schools where that are used on a long span of time over the day and over the years. This one really had to be a very responsive building, because you don't know who is going when and who is going to come. So it has a life like with like a sinusoid, goes up and down. This is that space that we didn't filled with activity. Was initially there was a program for meeting rooms and exhibition and offices, where all sort of things. And we, typical of the programs that we get in France, we thought, hey, come on, you can do many things in the one room. You don't have to do to make as many rooms as you have activities. You can do. You can use the cafeteria and the restaurant room for all the things like you're thinking of. You can meet in a restaurant. That's quite fair. So what we propose is to leave that space open for the time being, enlarge the other room, and sort of save a little bit of money, since the project was very, very, very short. That short budget really helped convincing our client that it was worth leaving a space unused and open to unplanned activity. So we thought students, researchers, also professionals from the site could just wait for each other when it's raining. They could play ping pong, or now they have a small also baby foot there and chairs, and they just can do whatever. This is we call it the mezzanine, and that's the stair going up. First to the restaurant, and then to the basketball courts that are on the roof. The building is sort of pretty. It's a deep plan that is lit from the inside, from the staircase itself, but it has absolutely no corridor inside. So it's really a building that has only bones and skin. It really has nothing in between. You have spaces such as this one, which is a little walkway between the main restaurant and the entrance. And you see it's you're outside on the right, because you're in the staircase, and you're outside on the left. So that's really an in-between space that we found interesting in the organization. And the sport room, this is the dance room, for instance. We played with mirrors so that the rooms would look twice bigger than they are. That's part of the kitchen, and that's the main room, the larger room. The restaurant that looks on three, that has sort of a panoramic view over the public square that has been created in front of the building, because it came actually before all public spaces. The roads and public square have been created after. And we paid attention. Sometimes we pay attention to details. But we thought that the ceiling was quite an important feature. Usually you said that the roof is the fifth facade. We thought, hey, when you are outside, you would see the ceiling. So we designed it really as a facade. This is a path underneath the building. We use it to park the bikes. So this is basically a building that has been conceived entirely through a series of cross sections, and that is actually way more complex vertically than it seems from the outside. Here you see the ceiling inside. The last word on Saclay, we thought of the night atmosphere was pretty much important, because we had in mind that the building should remain open 24-hour a day. Since when you have no density in a district, there's no idea of a center where people gather. But we thought maybe it could work like a 7-Eleven, like a little shop that is open all night and all day, and these are gathering places. These are places where people meet, not crowds, but that these are points of reference in the city that are a reference because they're open all night and all day. So that's the public path, basically, of the buildings, and we had a special program for working the light specifically through the staircase. This is the mezzanine. You see that the light is pretty bright compared to the rest of the building. It's like daylight. We also painted the floor white so that it really looked like a volume of light. That's the main hall, and you see the path. You see the public path at night that goes up the roof. You can follow the way that you can take, and that's our idea of the 24-hour building. So that's the last picture. We have a slight conclusion, as not absolutely finished, but we have we thought of a few words to say about that. Basically, our introduction, which was really much about publicness. Basically, this is a selection of buildings dedicated to education. We thought that their publicness was their the main feature. We think that this idea of publicness is a strong, is an important theme to reflect on at the moment. That's really much what we are trying to achieve. I mean, not very public buildings. We think it's not such an easy idea. There's been a time where public architecture was pretty clear. It was the architecture of town halls and Republican schools, for instance. You can recognize them, and the state was strong, and you could recognize it through the architecture itself. But we are in a different time where the public is has become quite a strange notion that is not so clear anymore, because in the French context, for instance, we know that the private investment are now and private powers are now taking over all aspects of the built environment. We feel there's a strong retreat of governments and cities on questions of planning and architecture. And therefore, we believe that that's pretty much related to a change in the feeling of public space, or what it means to create a public square today. You can see, I mean, in France, it's a public space today is really dull. We create really boring public spaces where really nothing can happen. That's the only thing you're sure of. Nothing will ever happen. Nobody will. Well, people maybe will march or contest whatever. It won't happen. It won't break anything because everybody is perfectly safe and protected. So these are not really what we can call public spaces, in fact. And we thought that in this context, architecture could play another role. It could come there and say, well, look, this is sort of this particular building is sort of a forum. We believe it could really work as such. We thought that architecture could play a role by very not only in a symbolic way, but on a very practical way. With truly architectural devices. Like the staircase here, or maybe we thought of the labyrinth. In the Clichy school, sometimes there are things that turn the inside out and make the buildings more feel more public. Well, that's about it for tonight. So if you have any questions, thank you. We'll be open. We're happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you very, very much for this very inspiring lecture. I would like to start a bit with the questions. So what you just said now about this public-private partnerships, the privates taking over, this is of course something that happens everywhere in Western Europe, and I think yeah, all the critical people yeah, just share the same opinion that this is yeah, kind of a problem, or could become a bigger problem the more and more. And together with this yeah, tendency, it kind of goes parallel. You have all this development of yeah, star architecture and these screaming yeah, architectures which just want to play important, want to act important, but in the end maybe it's doubtful what's behind all that. So in our interview, when we talked for this Arch Plus interview, you were mentioning that it's also about stopping innovation, stopping innovation that has become kind of forced or yeah, maybe even senseless. Huh? So you were arguing also in texts, I read that once, you were arguing against this innovativeness, in fact. Huh? On the other hand, what you do yourself, I mean, the project ENSA Clay is not at all a project which you cannot call innovative, you know. So I think it's quite a specific building, and it would be interesting to know what was the program of the building, you know. Was that intended like this from these clients who are building Saclay campus? Or was that what I suppose, was that quite in a big percentage or in a big amount your ideas as well? Huh? So the building is a completely new typology, in fact. So it's quite a strong invention. It's a very, let's say, evident invention, I would say. Yeah? It looks completely evident and as it should be, but it's still innovative, you know. So what is your point about yeah, innovativeness, or how would you distinguish the innovativeness which makes sense and the innovativeness which is maybe superficial and only interested in quick effects?
In architecture, it is quite rare to really imagine something new. I mean, invention is not that usual. But I think we need to make a distinction between newness, something that is new, and something that is innovative. Innovativeness has become like a gadget, like a slogan lately. And you see that the more you innovate, the less you imagine new things. That's the problem we have with innovation. We're not absolutely, it's a bit provocative. I mean, that's why you raised it. But we're not so much about innovation. We're really much about the effect of innovation, that it turns into things into that project this image of newness. And usually what it means to make things trendy, to make things just be part of their time. And that is just the opposite of invention. Invention is always something that is, I don't know how you say, offset, that is off its moment, and that is slightly in a retreat, that is somewhere else from where things usually happened. As Agamben, you know, the Italian philosopher, he says, if you want to be contemporary, you should not be part of your time. If you're too close to it, then you don't even see it, you know. So I think newness, if you want to create something new, you have to be somewhere else. And well, of course, that building is pretty much seems to come from post-war England or something. I don't know. It was really not really part of the architecture of its time, if you think of 2012. But I wouldn't say it's innovative. We didn't use very any new technological means. We thought it has to remain quite rough because of its population, because we thought that it should be able to evolve in time, and of course it's we were lucky enough to be given a very interesting brief. I think the program was super interesting from the beginning. You know, just the fact that bringing two activities that never come together, and then you need to imagine something else.
And I think we're quite lucky to have a good client as well that kind of responded to the fact. And maybe one piece of innovation in this building is maybe the way we worked with the program itself, with the functions. The fact that you can say to your client, maybe we should remove functions. We remove the entrance hall so the building is accessible. We remove the meeting room so we have a kind of an inner wasteland inside the building. I mean, it's kind of a typological and programmatical innovations that kind of were introduced into the building that, well, that kind of shift the building into something completely new, and it was maybe unexpected. I mean, if you have a building, we have an entrance door and there is an entrance on top, you know, usually it's like that. It's probably so common, and you've seen them everywhere. And usually when you're able to manipulate a little bit the program, it's possible to maybe to invent new typologies. And of course, we had a very low budget on this program. So it was also kind of easy to convince the client to say, take it away, you don't need it, you don't need that, and stuff like that. More or less easy. Yeah. Of course, it was a huge fight anyway, but made, I think, the client anyway was still.
Well, there was also a competition. There was also a public competition with a professional jury, which helped choosing such a project. There was in the brief. There was a one line that said, if you wish to change something about the program, please do it. And that's something we've never seen elsewhere, anytime before and after. And we've been struggling very much about the organization. And this was the program itself was a mystery, you know, it was a problem. And there was a lot of work it came by, not exactly by accident, but it came because the vocation of the building was pretty strong. And I think too often the programs are just Excel sheets, you know, they're just a series of numbers and spaces set next to each other. And here, of course, there was an Excel sheet, but there was that little sentence that said, the way we understood it, you know, we were super young, so we had nothing to lose as well. That's another condition. We thought if we want to make that work, we have to get rid of a few usual things, you know, such as main entrance, everything put into order, and we have to find another way to rearrange, to reorder the things with each other. And but we changed so many things in that building. I mean, it's more complicated than it seems. You know, just the only idea of having so much exterior space inside is not such an easy thing to get done because, you know, we have norms, you know, just as in Germany. You can imagine the difficulties, and also the simple fact of having all the technical stuff that is usually on the roof on the first floor means simply that you almost put the building upside down. And if you think in terms of norms, then it's an absolute mess. We never thought of that. So we're pretty naive enough to dare to do that, and not knowing how much norms would have to be twisted, and I mean, so much had to be reinterpreted in terms of norms that we went through. There was no way to go back. That's the chance we were lucky enough to make it so absolutely different from a normal building, then it went through.
I mean, they had no choice. It was too late.
It was too late. Yeah. The control bureau just when like he discovered new things every day. So in the end, well, we worked together pretty well. That was the first time we had to work together, actually. Yeah, he had too many subjects.
I find it quite remarkable that that this sentence was in the program, because I know, of course, French programs as well quite well.
Yeah.
Always completely.
You know, it was really tiny, very small.
No, but I find especially quite remarkable that you get a very innovative building just because of this one sentence. So that's actually the power of the Flemish architecture scene at the moment, that they have this this freedom. You know, there's always this freedom that you can interpret the program in a certain way, and that makes these architectures which appear there now very often so fresh and consistent, because you can convince clients, you know, about certain things what they never were imagining. So
and I think there's a difference between what we call the program, you know, the thing that should be done, and we said the vocation, what the building is about mainly. And usually for a school, I mean, we that's something we wrote about, concerning Boulogne. We say, okay, we know every single electric plug. We know how many plugs we need in every room, but we don't know why we're doing a school just here. And nobody's able to answer. Say, well, before you tell us how many plugs you want, tell us why we do it here and the role it has to play in the city. Huh? Why? And I think the most important and fundamental things about the presence of a building somewhere are not expressed, or really rarely expressed. We knew the reason for this building. We didn't know why here. There was some kind of an idea of another kind of place. That was the chance, I think, at the beginning. But we haven't found that much freedom so far in programs. Huh?
No, it's quite difficult, of course. Hey, just maybe to the audience. Everybody can ask questions. So there's a chat, and I will then ask the questions to Yves and Gilles. I have one more about typologies. Maybe you can mention that it will also guide us then to the first question from the audience about typological invention. Huh? The school you built in Boulogne, and we were also invited in school competitions in France. It's a real nightmare to conceive a school there, because you have this horror, this fear that the children might be seen from the outside. So I think a real typological invention on the level of school buildings, not university buildings, but schools for kids, would be to open the school. And I found quite amazing that you were showing this first building in Versailles, where you did not make a wall around, so you could look into this school. Was that the reason that you lost the competition, or can you say something about it?
Yeah. But actually, I mean, you had this kind of buffer zone, you know, on between the classrooms.
We thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, we had the impression there was a kind of a buffer zone between the classroom itself and the outer, glass garden. So
the round shape.
Yes. So we can have plants and everything. So you have a kind of a filter between, at least on the ground floor, between the classrooms and the public space. But maybe it was not enough.
No, I think this project is quite different, because this is the first time we did a school where the client was private. It was financed by a private investor. So I don't know how much it played in the decision of the jury, but I think they went for something safer. And I think even the future users didn't so much the idea of the garden, because then you have to do something else. It will contradict the official program. And I mean, the whole idea did make the school much more complex. We thought it would be more exciting, but they thought it was more complex simply. So,
yeah, it was maybe we thought it was also more contextual because we were in the gardens of the Chateau de Versailles. So I mean, for us it was like just an extension of one of the glass houses, just a bit further with a few classrooms inside. So we thought it was like a very interesting and very.
I would think our buildings or projects are interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but also with the children, kind of a kind of experience, of a kind of a growing up, and you have your plants and tomatoes plants growing up at the same time and stuff like that. So for us, it was a kind of a complete new story. But then, as Gilles said, we had a kind of a private client that built like 500 houses and buildings next to it. And probably the mayor said, okay, you can have your 500 houses, but you have to build a school as well. So it was a kind of a strange relation between the city, this kind of private investor, and us small architects.
The problem is safeness. Everybody's looking, budgets are fake, calendars are fake, everything's fake, in today's urban and architectural policies. Everybody's looking for safeness, and not only for the children. I think safeness is not only directed to children, but also to anything like a building. I think we realized, for instance, the environment referent in the jury said, "But your building is has too much glazed." So, for an environment. I mean, they're supposed to be professional, but they thought glass, complicated. Even though it was a buffer zone, everything was overly protected. It was a perfect green building. It wasn't about fake vegetation, plastic stuff and decorative stuff. But simply the image was too different, I think, and it looked safe somehow.
There's some questions from the audience. So normally I would now pass the microphone, but I just read you the questions.
Read the chat.
Yeah, the chat, yeah, exactly. So the one question here is, your buildings, schools, seem to have a very clean style that display the building as a contained element in itself, like a work of art that could maybe keep students from changing, personalizing it. So do you intend that, or how do you see?
I didn't get the thing about the children.
The end of your sentence.
The last part is, your buildings, they seem like a work of art that could maybe keep students from changing or personalizing it. Do you want your buildings to be perceived as a work of art that everybody stays in distance with?
The autonomy, I think, is pretty much we believe that. That it's part of it. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there should be alternatives, of course. We should be able to make open schools, but if you do them closed, then there's something else to do. I think the enclosedness and the stiffness, there's certain rigidity in the buildings we do, well, we would defend it. We do believe that, for instance, places could be like small microcosms. Say that, like they can be. We can create small worlds that are references where something happens, and then you want to change, then you go somewhere. We don't believe that you could just. I mean, change is not about pinning a drawing on the wall. That's. You can do that anywhere. Change is about going to one place and feeling something, and going to another place feeling something. And it's not and the rigidity of the buildings and the clarity of their organization for us it plays a role in the complexity of the world. And I think we need some clear points sometimes. And appropriation is a complex thing, you know.
Yeah, maybe it's also
depends what you mean about. I mean, the question was about raising the idea of appropriation. How do you appropriate buildings? Because, but it's not because we should not confuse the image of appropriation and real appropriation. Real appropriation, you know, if you want to appropriate like a thing, you just break it, you know, like kids, you know, they say, give me your, and they break the kid's toy and say, that's mine now. Or you spit in the salad, you know, that's fine. You know, appropriation is always destroying or making the thing dirty somehow. So appropriation is always for someone, you know, for a community or an individual, and raises the question of how you share the buildings. This is a whole question of publicness, in how you want to share places. For instance, you know, sharing can be to share means two things. You know, you use the same. I mean, in French, partager. No, I don't know. It only works in French. There's the sharing in French. We say partager. Partager means both bringing together. You know, you meet someone else. You want to spend your life together, so you bring the two toothbrushes into the same glass, and then when you split, you partager. You share the things. You know, you take your toothbrush with yourself and you go away. So the same word means bringing together and splitting. You know, and taking things apart. And that's the whole dilemma of making public places, you know, places where revolution happened, where royal squares, you know, in Paris, they were very formally stiff and integrated places, and there was a strong relation between urban space and architecture, and they were just not whatever looking appropriable places. They had a strong architecture, and you know, revolution happened there. So I don't think you have to replicate appropriation in order to make places appropriable. You just have to make them shareable and accessible.
Okay, and there's one other question from the public, and that's a question I avoided to ask because we were talking quite good about it at the time, but now it's asked here. Does your process start from the structure or from form, shape? What is the element that generates your buildings? So
I think it's organization.
Yes, probably.
How do you go from one place to another? How do you cross here? What do you put on top and underneath, on the right or on the left? It's all about appropriation, about organization.
And the typology of organization. How would you organize it
exactly.
Vertically?
One stair, and then you have the different floors on each side until you have the roof. Boulogne is the spiral of the different boxes. Clichy is that flat plate with two holes inside and the circulation around. Basically, so how you walk through the place, we start from the collective, actually, pretty much.
And then the structure just punctuates this kind of organization.
Usually comes after.
It's not kind of a gesture we want to do in the beginning, you know. It's coming way after, actually.
And then it's very present in our project simply because we don't hide it. That's all. I mean, it's not shaped like. I mean, it's never like a super. It's not like a Calatrava structure, and they always look quite stupid. even though it's not easy to do. Like for instance, in the Saclay, you have tiny columns and huge beams, so it's more complex than it seems, because the columns are not made the same way as the beams. The beams are totally stupidly industrial beams, but the columns, they're full of metal. So but it creates sort of a feeling of heaviness and lightness. But we usually try to keep the structure quite, I would say, stupid as it is, so that when you see it, it feels really naked. If you would really design it like Calatrava does, then it would just look not so naked anymore. It wouldn't look it would look very finished. If you think of Calatrava, it's showing a lot more the structure than we do, and the feeling is different in the end.
When we did the interview, you said you start with a collection of images, and you want to make a radiator, or you want to make a
yeah, we have stupid images in mind sometimes. We cannot tell our clients. Yeah, we like sometimes it's funny how the structure comes out depending on the organization and where you have to put it. And it's interesting. We like the possibility for the structure to be not the way we thought. Well, in Saclay, I mean, if you would look in the plans more specifically, you see that it's full of exceptions. There's a grid, and then inside the columns come one, but then by two, the stairs, the cores are different width. I mean, it's always we like to keep the buildings quite as coherent entities so far, because we've done buildings that are not so big. It's interesting where things get a little bit more complicated as you enter and you start having an interior adventure.
And also on one side we work with the program very much, but on the other side we kind of develop this kind of collective set of images, what we call the imaginaire of what would the ideal project be. And so we gather a lot of graphical material, and so we have this work going on at the same time. And then at one moment they kind of they cross, and so it kind of makes a project and can split apart maybe a bit later. And so we kind of develop these two aspects at the same time. So I think we're also very visual. We like to see the things we like to see. Oh, is it nice, or is it interesting, or is it kind of awful? Is it kind of strange? Is it kind of so that's why we get all these images of radiators, of a kind of industrial things or whatever, or engines. Or
the good thing with Saclay, the combination was too complex to be reduced to a single glass box. And that's the good thing. That's why the building is interesting. It totally resisted to our tendency to simplify everything. So that's why it is just like it is. I mean, the exception made it more interesting than just a normal flat usual project, when the program has already anticipated the shape of the building itself. But we do not really work on the shape itself. I mean, usually that's not the point.
I mean, it comes usually a bit by itself, From an urban point of view, it's kind of logical to place the building like that, or because of the functions, or because of some constraints or whatever, something like that. So it's never kind of just a gesture, kind of a master sketch, and you draw something and it becomes like that.
Yeah, we hardly draw.
I think
students should. You should draw. Don't.
I think it's a quite nice finish of the evening. So there's no other questions anymore. So I would like to thank you very, very much for this very inspiring lecture.
Yeah. Thank you, Andre.
And have some small informations for the audience, especially for the students in Hanover. First of all, please follow us on Instagram. So there's the Studio Campetil Instagram account where you find also the announcements of the lectures, at least we organize, and all the other activities. That's one important message. And the next lectures we organize in this series is next week. We have NP2F, again Tuesday 8th of December. And we have one more, but this is just in February. So 2nd of February, we have Lacaton Vassal, Anne Lacaton, who is giving a lecture in the series we organize here. So again, thank you very much. Normally we would like to drink now a beer or wine, go having dinner, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we cannot do that, which is really pity. So we can only stare in screens and yeah.
I should have taken yes.
Yes. Next time.
All right.
You have to improve.
I don't know, Celine, if you still have something to add. So nothing else to add. So we have to just finish now. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and we're happy to come. Well, next time we'll
come for real.
Yeah, exactly.